always like to talk about, I always like to start a conversation from like the parents, because I think the parents are like the foundation of who we are, right? And I want to talk about your parents because, well, we know you from TV, we know you from social media, right? You have this strong character, but not only do you have a strong character, you're a leader, right? I believe so. I think you're a leader, right? And you're leading a new generation of young Latinos, Latinas, Mexicoamericanas, right? And like in the U.S. and LA specifically, I feel like we've been like the population that's ignored, but we're like the majority here. And so I like to talk about your parents because I want to know like you're the product of what they created, right? And so talk to me about your mom and your dad. First of all, your mom, where's she from?
Well, I will agree with you. I think we, definitely people are, in general, they're just products of like the environment and products of like what they've lived and products of what they surround themselves with. I was blessed enough to have two amazing parents. My parents came to the US illegally, I don't know, 30 something years ago. They crossed the border through different ways, different means, obviously for the American dream, right? To have a better future, to look for a better future. They both came here separately. My dad is from Sinaloa and my mom's from Durango. So my dad came here by himself. My mom came here with her siblings and her parents. And my dad tells me that when he came here, it was just one of those like spontaneous kind of things. He was working in Culiacan in Mexico, and he was like he was very young. He was 17, 18 years old, working since he was like 12. And they told him a brother was already here and like some other siblings were here. So he came over here. And, he tells me that he got here one day and the next day at 6 a.m. he was working. And he hasn't stopped working since that day that he came here. He has not stopped working. I mean, obvious the vacations and things like that, but he's worked here for many years, doing, hard labor. Like it wasn't a job that required or that wanted. It was a job with steel, a job with trucks, with a lot of machinery. A job that's been very dangerous, a job that's like put in danger his health for many reasons, just because they're much more difficult to do than an office job, let's say. So that was like a sacrifice that I knew growing up. I'm like, wow, my dad, never had a chance to maybe even think like, oh, I want to be this when I grew up. He didn't have that ability. Even when he got here, he had to survive. And then after that, he had to support a family. He got married with my mom, and my mom's journey was particular as well. She came with her siblings. She's told me that she went across the border through tunnels. She crossed the borders through the mountains. She worked the fields in the Central Valley with her siblings. She worked at factories. She worked at a factory where they used to sew clothes. She was a nanny. She did like so many jobs. And obviously when I was born and when she got married, she was more like of the stay-at-home mom, even though she still was working. So I come from very like strong, resilient parents. I come from a family of a lot of sacrifices, but at the same time, a lot of love and a lot of support. My parents were always very supportive in all my endeavors. School was always a priority. School was number one. My parents always expected no more than, nothing less than a straight A student. And that was always just delivered. I love school, so I enjoyed it. And that was my childhood. I used to travel when my parents were able to get residency, and then after that, their citizenship here. They were able to fulfill all these American dreams, of buying a home, of buying cars, of sending their kids to college, of taking a vacation. Those are things that as a little girl, they were not really, when other friends would say it, you're like, well, my vacation is probably going to Mexico in the summer if it happens. But, those things started changing. And then, my brothers also as well when they started growing up. So yeah, my mom is probably one of the strongest women I know. She is extremely giving. She's extremely kind. Truly does believe in helping others. I think that's where that comes from too. Like continues to be a part of this community of Catholic ministers where they do different organizations to help, you know, the community in their faith. So she, you know, that part of like the giving and that part of being, you know, kind of very selfless, you know, and the benefit of others definitely comes from that. Also from my dad. My dad has always been that very kind spirit, very giving spirit. But my dad's also a very smart man. Like, he's probably one of the smartest people I know, even though he just barely finished elementary school. He's one of the smartest people I know. He loves knowledge. He loves learning. And I think that has been a huge component for me as an adult now. And it was a huge deal for me as a little girl. He used to buy me almanacs. I remember at Pick and Save, like the almanacs that were like old, because they would go on sale. They would be on sale at Pick and Save, and that was something that I would be like, well, why? This is from like 3 years ago, but it would be, no, read it. It's still very informative. So, you know, obviously I grew up in a low income household, in a very kind of tarnished community of low income families. But even though we were lacking in like excessiveness of resources, we had so much love, and we had so much, you know, around us, and so many great experiences with such a tight knit family that we still are, and like all these connections that we had to like our culture and in Mexico, and the love that we have for our heritage, and the love that we have for like our people, for sure comes from that community.
And like, what's your earliest memory? You grew up where?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, born and raised.
And what are your earliest memories of San Fernando?
The earliest memories, probably playing with my friends in the front yard. I love animals, and I used to love chickens. So my parents used to buy me pollitos, and I used to grow them, and I used to have like a lot of chickens. That was my thing. It was really interesting. As a little girl, I had a bunch of chickens, and then when they would grow into like big gallinas and roosters, I would get scared because they were so big. But I loved pollos, so I remember my parents always wanted me to always gifted me like, okay, you want to take care of a pet? Okay, you have a chicken. Not knowing that in due time they were gonna kill it and it's gonna become caldo de pollo, and that was another ordeal because that traumatized me for life. So then I stopped having chickens. So definitely those memories of like family unity, you know, of being with my parents, my parents used to throw me these like big birthday parties every year. And I remember them, you know, very, very vividly. I remember our trips to Mexico when my parents were able to get residency right after I was born. So I remember as a little girl, like getting on a plane with my parents and my uncles and going to like Mazatlan, right? And like being in my decked out outfit, because, you know, you have to be real fly when you got to Mexico. And yeah, like spending time with family and friends, and learning about, you know, my parents' childhood too, and learning from where they came from and the things that were important to them, because that's something too that I think as children of immigrants, like we forget that, you know, our parents also had a life wherever they left their life. You know, they left their life in Mexico and Central America. They left their friends, they left their community, they left their, like, these are things that when we go back, it's like, this is where he grew up. This is where she went to school. These were her friends. Oh my God, this was her best friend. Like, what? This was who he hung out with. This is what he used to do when he was in Culiacan. My dad when he lived in Culiacan, he was a taquero. So tacos in Sinaloa are like a big deal. We are so, we truly do believe that the best tacos de asada son de Sinaloa. I truly do believe that. So for him, it was like going back and him showing me that part of his life. But also like then realizing like, man, what did my dad want to be when he was a little kid? Like, do we even ask our parents? Like, do we ever even sit down and like, you know, if it wasn't because of the money, if it wasn't because you were from a small town and maybe didn't have the resources, if it wasn't because you had to migrate to another country, like what would you have been if you had all these opportunities? And sometimes we'd be surprised with the answers. You know, my dad sometimes tells me like he wanted to be a baseball player and he wanted to be a teacher and he wanted to do all these things that are also now very reflective of him, of myself and my brothers, you know, his kids. So that's something too that, you know, I have memories of. Like my dad loves music. So I remember him playing the accordion, you know, when we were little at the house. You know, I remember him bumping music every weekend. Like that was his thing. He loves Mexican music and knows so much about it. He loves baseball. So that was also a memory, going to Dodger games on like the outfield for like $5 and being, you know, oh my God, Dodger Stadium. Because that's what you could afford. You know, you're talking about a family of 5. It was a ticket that back in the day, that's how much it was. And it was already a lot of money. Like it was already a lot. So yeah, I think I have, you know, most of my fond memories as a little girl in the San Fernando Valley, as this like Mexican American little girl, are with my family, are with my siblings, are with like my extended family, and like the beauty of our culture and the beauty of who we are as people and what we bring to the table. And also too, the beauty of this duality now that I get to experience completely. This idea of being Mexican American and like having to be, you know, more Mexicans than the Mexicans and more Americans than the Americans, as much as, you know, that quote, I wanted Selena in that quote, but like, yeah, trying to prove yourself as a Mexican and trying to prove yourself as an American. And you know, your English has to be this way, and then you wanted your Spanish to be this way. I grew up with that. I grew up with that like duality, but being able to manage, thankfully, both of them simultaneously, and now being able to use that in my career, you know, has been for sure a blessing. So
yeah, and then especially you mentioned a lot about baseball, tacos. That's like the main, like the cuna of what Sinaloa is, right? Baseball, tacos,
music.
But you know, in one of the interviews that I saw from you, you mentioned that you wanted to be a doctor, and then you also mentioned that you wanted to be a teacher, right? Like after, because you were scared of blood, so you're like, no, maybe I might be a teacher.
Right.
But then one day you were watching TV and you saw Christina Manpur, right? And then you're like, wait, this lady with a thick accent and like black hair, like, dude, she's not güerita, like, okay.
Right.
And so like that impact that you have, right?
Right.
That you had with her, like, what memories do you have from that?
Well, you know, I think growing up, like for any little kid, right? One, you grow up wanting to be famous. For like little girls, you want to be on TV, you want to be a singer. You think, I mean, I remember doing talent shows for everybody, and I would sing and I would dance, and I mean, as a little kid. And then you're growing up and you see, well, no, you know, I wanted to be a doctor. And I was like, okay, I want to be a doctor and like help kids. You know, and I remember I was always really scared of blood. So that in due time, I was like, all right, that goes off my list. I've always loved learning and like knowledge. So that idea of like teaching has always been in me. Like I still want to somehow be a teacher, be a professor in a school or somewhere. Because I do feel like there's power behind educating youth or educating children. Like there's so much power behind, you know, guiding them. I grew up in a low income community. I went to what was considered, you know, mostly Mexican American kids, low income, but I was really, really blessed to have amazing teachers that were American, some that were from other countries, but that really ignited in me the love for books, the love for words, the love for learning, and that really helped me and guided me and I wasn't like a distraction to them. It was really like, let me help the student. And that to me, I was always fond of teachers. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be able to teach kids, because I was also that little girl at school that always finished things really fast and always wanted to help the other students. So that idea of help was always there. That's why and ironically, I mean, my dad has always been very fond of teachers. He was always both of my parents were very involved in school, but him telling me like I wanted to be a teacher because, you know, I didn't have it. I only had it till a certain grade. And back in the day, teachers were not what they are today. They were in Mexico, especially in these small towns, they were rough. Like it was, the curriculum was not as it is now, or, you know, these things that people need to follow. So he was like, yeah, I would love to have gone to different towns, different pueblos, and been a teacher to a lot of these kids that don't have it. And that also struck with me, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's something that now I've done in other projects in my life. I love dolphins. So at some point I wanted to like save dolphins in the realm of medicine. I'm like, oh my God, I want to just love, you know, work in like ocean and learn about the ocean. And then, yeah, I think I also I grew up watching El 34 at home in LA. I mean, I grew up watching Univision. I grew up watching María Salinas. And not because I wanted to, but by default, because that's what my parents were watching. So I had no choice. It was like, that's the only TV we have. So that's what we were watching. But and I always loved María Elena Salinas. I always remember watching her and being like, wow, she's so powerful. And she's this woman, you know, who's showing news. And I'm like, okay. And it wasn't until I found out that she was from LA and that her family's from Sinaloa that I really was like, oh my God, she's like me. She's an LA girl, born and raised, and her dad's from Sinaloa, like mine. Oh my God, this is crazy. And we've taken a similar path. She started also too, not in hard news. She started in something else, and then in hard news. So it was all these like, oh my gosh, all these resemblances. But even then, I think when I saw for the first time Cristiana Amanpour on TV, and it was like on CNN, it was like, oh, this woman too that had an accent, this woman that had dark hair, that looked like me, and that was doing all this work abroad. She was like doing specials in other countries. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And seeing someone that looked like me, that, you know, somehow, some way was a reflection of like, a story like mine of a woman of color. I was like, that could be, I can reach that. You know, I can get there if she's there. Yeah, it's tangible. Whereas other careers, sometimes you felt like you didn't have a place because you never saw yourself in them. Like, I think it's so important now. That's why for our kids, to show our kids, like, listen and share our stories of success. Like, if there's a doctor that's from our community, like, tell your story. Because we need to show our kids that even though we come from these places where maybe, you know, we don't get the best resources, where we don't get the best access to things, where we have to really work hard. I mean, I had a job in high school, my entire high school years. I was in every activity you could think of. I was in student council. I was a cheerleader. I started a group of like Latinos in my school. Mind you, my school was like 80% Latino, but it was like a literature club. We wanted to read Spanish literature. It grew to be a huge club. I was taking college classes while I was in high school. And even then, I was still limited with the resources that I had, you know? I still didn't have the money to pay to take SAT course prep. You know, I didn't have a tutor to like guide me through college. I didn't have a private life coach to tell me, oh, you know, this is your life path. These are the schools for you. No, I had to do that on my own because my parents didn't understand it either. They barely finished elementary school. How could they teach me about financial aid or college process, even though they learned it with me? But still, it's not the same thing. It's like this privilege is real. Privilege is real. And even though I come from a somewhat privileged environment of having two parents at home, never having to, you know, worry at home because my parents, you know, were able to provide, having a safe environment at home, you know, like being loved, being cared for, that's already my privilege that a lot of other kids don't have. But even then, even with my excess in a lot of things, I still had to like work extra hard in other things. I still had to double it up in other things in order to maybe be considered at institutions, to be considered at these places that I wanted to attend school, to be considered for financial programs, like all these things that we just don't have because we don't have the privilege of money, or we don't have the privilege of access. Those are things that I value today a lot and that I share about a lot because we don't understand that struggle of a lot of immigrant, kids of immigrants in this country. And, you know, a lot of just young people that live in these areas, that live in these communities that need a lot of our help. And again, when you don't see it, then how do you know it's even there? I don't think I didn't go to the beach here in California till I was in like high school because it was too far from me from the valley. And on the weekends, my parents sometimes had to work and sometimes had other obligations that like, if you want to go to the beach, you're cute. You know, that's going to happen, right? When we go to Mazatlán, allá vas a la playa, you know?
Or you have to go to work with me today.
Right, or like, exactly. Or for kids that it's like, Saturdays? No, we work.
My Saturdays were always at work.
Yeah, or Saturdays? No, you got homework or all these other things to do. Or it's too far. It's too expensive to go down there. We don't do that because it's, and then also too, we just don't know it. Yeah. You know, we just don't know that it's there. So.
Or like me, I had the attitude of like when I was a kid, I felt embarrassed going to those places.
Right.
I felt less than, and I just
like
didn't
we didn't
feel
belong.
Like I was part
we
of
didn't
that.
belong. Right.
I'm like, no, I'm more part of like Huntington Park. I
Right. That feels.
They call it dangerous, but I'm at 12 in the morning, 2 in the morning, like.
And to you, that was comfort. That was comfortable. That was your area. In these other new places, it was like, I'm out of place. I don't fit here. I don't fit the mold.
You know, I want to touch more on the ghost part because that's how I've normally how I felt till recently, and not only that, but I feel that our community, even though we're like big in numbers here in LA, I feel like we're like ghosts. Like people go eat tacos in the West Side, right? I'm really exposed to the West Side because that's where like the nonprofit is. That's where I work. Right. So like I've grown up. When you talk about privilege, you know, servicing those schools when I used to be at the schools, because I mean now I do accounting, but when I was at the schools, I would listen to the parents talk to their kids, right?
Right. And
I was like, wow, these gringos like really do talk to their kids about. They talk to them not only like they don't talk to them as kids, they talk to them as adults, but they expose them and they network with them. Because they know parents, right? Right. Oh, the parents are brain surgeon. Oh, this parent works for Fox News. Oh, this other parent works for Fox Sports. Oh, this one works for ESPN. This one works blah 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 blah. They all have the connections. Oh, this was running for mayor. This was running for governor. This was running whatever. Right. And so, talk to me more about. Okay, so this passion comes about. You see Christina Amanpour, right? Mm-hmm. You get excited. You're like, whoa, what the heck is this, right? Now I see this goal that's attainable. How do you work towards that goal? That's part of the project that we're trying to do is, okay, how do you attain it? Right. How do you work towards it? So talk to me about high school. I want to know about your high school. I want to know how you got to Miami, because that was like crazy to me, right? And then I want to know about more your studies, like what you've done, what projects are you working on?
I mean, you know, like I mentioned, high school was definitely a very interesting time for me because I was one of those overachieving kids and I wanted to do a million things and I was part of a million clubs and I worked and I did all these things because I wanted to shine in my college application. I knew about college. I knew I wanted to go. I had to learn the ropes along the way.
Let me ask you something real quick. Because that's important to me. Okay, where does that mindset come from? Like you wanting to shine dude, for me, it was like, if I go to community college, I'm like, dude, basically.
I think for me, it came like growing up in a household where, again, I was a straight A student. My parents expected nothing less. Like it was like, school's a priority, you're going to shine. And never with the intention of like, you're going to become a doctor, surgeon. No, just school's a priority, learning's a priority. That's what you're going to do. I don't think to me, college was ever a question because when you become like a gifted student and you just become a student that teachers are watching, like, oh, she's straight A student. I signed up for every college program without even knowing about college in middle school and in high school. So I was part of college programs in middle school without even knowing what I even wanted to do, without even knowing about college. And that's where I learned about college. That's where I learned about university. And that's when I realized it's not an option. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to graduate high school. And no, it's like, I'm going to college and I'm going to like a good school and I'm going to study what I want to study. Because by the time I realized when I was in high school that I wanted to be a journalist, that was it.
So you have your goal.
I was like, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to be on TV. I'm going to be doing Spanish news and I want to do hard news and I want to travel the world.
So now you're working and looking for resources now, right?
So now you're just like, okay, give me more information. What are the best schools? What do I have to do to get into those schools? Those are things that, I didn't have a live coach. I didn't have a counseling coach. Those are things that I had to look within myself. Thankfully, I was a part of a lot of school programs and a lot of like upward bound programs that were able to facilitate my research, that were able to tell me, okay, all right, someone sit down. All right, these are the top schools. This is what you want to study. This is what they recommend you study now. So I was already, the moment that I was like 15, I was already working towards those things to make sure that I was going to get into a really good institution that had a really good journalism program, because that's what I was going to study. That was set. Obviously, I applied to all the schools in California that I wanted to go to, UC Berkeley, UCLA. Those are also my two top schools that my parents would have loved me to go. They were begging me for me to stay in California. But I really thought that I really wanted to get an experience. Again, when you live in a very small community and when you're very sheltered from a lot of things, because not because your parents want to, but because they can't afford it and because it's not reasonable, you want to like spread your wings and fly. You want to like be like, let me experience something else. So for me, it was like, let me experience something in another city, and let me experience something, and let me experience college, you know, out of state on my own. And I've always been also very independent as a little girl. So it was always, for me, it was like, easy. I'm going to go to school away from home. Whereas like a lot of other, you know, students and kids that I grew up with, they're like, I'm like, no, I'm going across the country to go to school. And then when when financial aid came in and the university gave me a scholarship, that helped me in my decision making. Like, oh, this is certain. This is where I'm going to go to school. So that was for me. That's what it was like for me. Again, it was hard in terms of like the resources. Going to a school where there was thousands of students, you don't have the same resources. You have to share books. You don't have lockers. The lockers don't work. You don't have all the money in the world to do all these other activities. You don't have money to pay for an SAT prep course. You don't have money to like, you don't have anybody to take you to the SAT prep courses at UCLA every weekend. That's something that's just going to be a burden on your family. So you don't even want to do that. I worked all my high school, and I paid for everything that I had to do with college because I didn't want, even though my parents could probably afford it, I didn't want to be a burden on them because I had two younger brothers that were going. And if anything, for me, it was like, and I think this is also the very first children of immigrant mentality, like, I'm going to make it easier for them because I know it was hard for me. So I need to help them. I need to make sure that all the resources that we have now at my house go to them so that they're able to get to a good school. So that they're smarter than me.
And as an older sibling.
And as an older sibling, you just have that obligation of like making their lives better. So that's what it was like for me in high school. Then when I got into Miami, it was like no questions. I'm going there, and I did. My parents couldn't take me to college. My parents, as it was, I had very limited funds for my financial aid to go to school. So I was very frugal with my money. And like, I remember buying my ticket. It was like $200. It was like the cheapest airline ticket I found. And I remember my mom didn't want to take me. My mom was going through a really hard time, like kind of letting me go. And so was my dad, but my mom more than any of them. And I remember my dad was going to go with me. And at the end, it was just going to be too much money because he had to get a hotel and we had to get like all these things that I was like, no se apure. Like, yo me voy sola. I was like 16, 17 years old. So, and I remember going with 3 huge maletas. My brother and my dad took me to the airport because my mom was like in tears and extremely sad. I want to even say she was going through like a huge depression when I left because as a traditional Mexican family, you don't leave your house until you get married.
And you're 16.
Yeah, and I was so young that they're like, what are you doing? So I know it was really, really hard for her, for all my entire family, but especially for her. And here I am, bye, I'm going to Miami, sunshine and school. And again, thankfully, I was very blessed to have a lot of other programs at Miami too that took in first-year students, that took in out-of-state students, that took in Latino students, that took in Mexican students. There was a population of a lot of Mexican students in Miami that had an organization, like Mexican-American organization, and that had these things of like helping us and guiding us that were, I mean, huge, because you get to this place where you don't know anybody. You don't know anybody in the city. And you're like, what do I do? And then you don't have anybody else. You don't have your parents to like help you. So, that was my experience, college. Then after that, sickness kicks in. It's real. It kicks in, and it was me wanting to come home. I missed home. Then you miss everything about your home, like the smells, the dogs barking, the roosters going off, like all these things that make your home and your community, and you're away from it. It becomes like I don't know. Yeah, it becomes like this thing that you yearn for. My mom used to send me food, Mexican food, in like Tupperware, like overnight it, because I would be so nostalgic for like Mexican food. She would send me like guayabas from her tree because I would like, ay, se me antoja una guayaba, like, or just her wanting to send me things that she felt would remind me of like home, you know. And I remember getting those boxes and being in tears, like, oh my God, I want to go back. And like, why did I even want to come here? And you go through those moments. But, you know, that was, again, it was all of those things, all those sacrifices that at the end I knew I was going to make were for that. Were like, my parents left their home, left their country, not knowing language, not knowing where they're going, not having any money, not having any resources, left everything that was comfortable to them, literally to a completely new country.
Without being able to go
back. Without legal paperwork, without the language, anything. I'm like, I'm not going to go across a country when I have all these opportunities, and when I have all these resources, and when I have lot of privilege to be able to do this. Like, how many people would love to do this? And I'm not going to take advantage of it, and I'm not going to make the best of it and continue to work on my goals, on my goal of becoming a journalist. Like, it was like, no, I have no excuses.
You owe it to them.
Yeah, it's like, this is my success is part of all their sacrifices. I always say that to kids, and always say that to students, and especially Latino students, like, never forget it. Like, what we accomplish, it's a succession of like their struggles and their sacrifices is what they couldn't achieve, is what they could have wanted to for them as well, but they didn't even were remotely close to the opportunities that we have. So we owe it to them to continue on fulfilling this American dream, so that I am able to now provide for them some kind of a better life, so that now I'm able to provide my children with a better life as well. So I think, like, I mean, that in terms of goals and of like things that we wanted to do for ourselves, it always ties back to where we come from. It always ties back to what we grew up with. It always ties back to our parents and what we lived with them, you know, like the pain sometimes of like not, for a lot of families, of not having food, the pain of like working extra, the pain of not seeing your parents because your parents have to work, the pain of like of a lot of things that we go through that not a beautiful regular family with a lot of access and a lot of, you know, money can have. So yeah, I everything that I do is for them. Everything that I am is because of them. Everything that I want to accomplish is for them. I continue to live with this idea that I don't ever want to do something that my dad wouldn't be proud of. Like, if there's something that my dad wouldn't approve, I'm not going to do it in my career and in my life, especially in my career, because he now they both have been hand in hand moving along in my career. You know, when I got my first big job, and it was a show that I did on Mundos called Reventon, when they first told me that, like, you know, this is your show, of course, the first call that I did was to my parents. And luckily my dad was in his lunch break and he was at home. And they picked up, and I'm like, oh my God, I just got the job. And they were like, and I was screaming and they were screaming, and they were like, oh my God.
They lived through you. They're living their experiences through you. What
they're living. Everything. They're living all, and they're living every fabric of what I do. The pain, the hurt, and the happiness. The success, and also the failures, because it also hurts them. But the success, there's a sweetness to it, because it's like them being able to be like, man, that's my daughter, and man, like, remember, like my mom, I call myself the intern queen, because I did so many internships when I was in college. Again, for my goal, I knew that I was gonna become this. So when I was in high school, I was making sure that my application for college looked good. And then when I was in college, it was making sure that my resume for my job looked. And that's kind of like how I live my life now. Like, everything that I'm doing, it's like, it's my resume for the next thing. It's my resume. It's on my resume for my next big thing. It's my application for my next big project. I still continue to live by that. So continuing to feed into my resume so that when the next thing comes around, I'm ready for it, and I'm ultra extra qualified. So I was the intern queen. I did so many internships, and I remember telling my mom, like, Ama, ¿se acuerda cuando me tenía que manejar? She used to drive me from the Valley to Hollywood every day for me to do my internship at Channel 5. Drive me at 7 a.m. and then pick me up at like 12. Mind you, she knew how to drive and was comfortable driving and had her driver's license, but then she was like, ay, es que me da miedo esas áreas because no las conozco. And I remember her being like, no, usted me va a llevar, pues, ¿qué voy a hacer? And her having to change her day. Sometimes she would wait for me for those 5 hours in the parking lot because she couldn't go back home. So all those little things of like, ay, mamá, ¿se acuerda cuando hacía eso? Dad, ¿se acuerda cuando usted me tenía que llevar a, whatever, these places to learn this? All those things add up. All those things is like this pot of who you are. And all those things with your family. My brothers had to make sacrifices for my dreams too. A lot of them. So I, in that, it's like now it's like you owe a part of all of that stuff to them. We recently won an Emmy for our coverage. It was my first Emmy in this KMEX, a recognition. And like they asked me, they're like, oh, where are you gonna put it? And I was like, I'm gonna give it to my parents. Like that's for them. I mean, it might not mean a lot. They might not understand the complexity of it, but this is something that I know tangible that I could be like, Apa, Ama, like this is for you. Like this is all the sacrifices that throughout my entire career you've made. This is for all like the values that you've instilled in me. This is for all the stuff that you left because of me, the stuff that you couldn't do, the stuff that you continue to do for me. So everything, it's crazy. Everything always ties back for me to that, to like family, to community. And at the end, like really that's why I do what I do. And that's what I enjoy so much what I do, to be able to know that I'm talking to people across the TV like my parents.
So you had goals, you set goals, and you have the target, right? So so now someone's watching, someone wants to be a journalist. They want to be an executive at Univision. They want to be part of the like TV community. They just want to be part of the network. How do they, there's a young girl, a young man, young person just looking across right now, right? And saying, okay, I want to be able to achieve what she's achieved. How do I get there? What's the first thing I have to do, and how's the road? And what are the things I have to do?
I think for sure is like realizing what it is that you want. For me, it came early, it came certain, like this is what I want. But a lot of people don't have that. Don't know. There's a lot of, to this day, there's a lot of things that I enjoy. I enjoy sewing. I enjoy a lot of things, not necessarily in terms of like what I want a career to be. But I think narrowing down to what it is that you want to do in life, what you want, what your passion is, what you want to, I tell a lot of people too, it's like sometimes it's not even like what you love, it's what you want to change, like what you want to see different. I'm a Mexican girl that has dark hair, and that's always going to be me. And in a space where sometimes they're not used to seeing that, it's being comfortable enough in your own skin to be able to break those molds and to be able to be like, no, there's thousands and hundreds and millions of little girls that look like me, that come from where I come from. So I'm a reflection of them and they're a reflection of me. So I'm not going to change my hair. I'm not going to do anything. This is who I am, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it, and I'm confident in the woman that I am. So getting down to that, right? Really learning yourself, really knowing yourself, narrowing down what it is that you want to do, and never stopping in that quest for achieving it. All that I'm telling you right now with like high school and college, everything for me was to be here, and envisioning myself. And the job where I was before, that job, I had dreamt about it before. And the job before, I had dreamt about it before. So it's like all these things of like, where do I want to be next? What do I want to happen? And making things happen. In this career, obviously it's a tough career like any other career. It's a lot of sacrifices. It's a lot of, putting others in situations before yourself. It's a lot of, es muy desgastante. It could be very draining, and it's very, it takes a toll on you, because for the most part, you're giving news that are not the most positive of news. They're tragedies that are sad. So that takes a toll on your well-being, on your emotional well-being. It's a very difficult career. But for that reason, I feel like it's even more important for us to be more adamant about it. If this is what you want, like, continue to work on it. Learn learn the basics of it. Be an intern. Knock on doors. Now we have the beauty of the internet with emails and social media, where we're able to like connect with someone if we wanted to. I have connected with so many people that I admire on social media through email that maybe before we couldn't have that opportunity. So using those means to like reach out, apply for internships, apply for jobs, expand your experience. Make sure that you are well experienced in a lot of things within that thing that you want to do. And especially in this career, that you're knowledgeable in a lot of areas, that you know a lot of people, that you're flexible, that you're curious, that you love to learn, that you're never, it's not like we know everything. I recently sat with our news director, our assistant news director. She was telling me something, and I was telling her, like, yeah, like, I don't know everything, and I'm nothing. I'm no one. I'm nobody. I don't know anything, and I'm nobody. That's the mentality that I live with. I'm a regular person like anybody else, and I've still got so much more to learn. Like, I'm ignorant to a lot of things because I just don't know. But I want to learn. I want to learn. I want people to teach me. I want people to school me, to show me. And I'm nobody. I'm just a girl that happens to give you the news. That's it. So that's my kind of like, you know, my idea of like what it is for you to achieve it. Obviously, you know, following those things of like going to college, getting a job after, maybe having to go do those sacrifices of working at a smaller station to get to a bigger station. But I can tell you exactly, I envisioned this. When I came to this place, this news station, I was coming from Miami. I was living in Miami, and I was doing a lot of entertainment stuff and some news stuff, digital news stuff. And there was a lot of opportunities that were coming my way. And either one, they didn't fit, they weren't fitting, and two, they weren't for me. They were given to someone else. And a part of me, was like, wait, when is it going to be my break again? I need a break. I need to have something. Where are my dreams? Why aren't they happening? But in all of that, I was still like, no, manifesting. Like, I want it to be like this, like this, like that. It's this colors, it's this kind of newscast. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be a reflection of who I am. And then this opportunity came around. And in the moment that they told me about it, I was like, never in my mind did I say, oh, it's going to go to someone. Never did I think like, it could not be mine. The moment that I interviewed for it for the first time, I was like, I'm going back to LA. And this was months before I actually took the job, or that I actually moved out here. It was like, this is mine, and I'm moving back. So now I need to work on that movement and like preparing myself for this, because it's going to be very challenging. So yeah, I mean, for sure, it's not an easy industry. It's not an easy industry to break into. It's not an easy industry to like really even, you know, maintain a career now with like social media and everything that's changing in digital. But it's attainable. It could be done. Precisely not maybe the same route that I have, because again, I tell people this a lot, like, don't follow, everybody wants to be Oprah. Everybody wants to be, but it's like, Oprah had her journey. That was her journey, and it wasn't an easy journey. I love her. I wish I could be a little bit of who she is and what she's accomplished in people's lives, and the impact she's made on people's lives. Oprah, if you see this, I'm your girl. But you know, like, I wish, you know, but it's like, that's her journey. And Maria Elena Salinas has had her journey. She had to break through so many other obstacles. She had to live through so many other things that it's like, I wish I had a little bit, of course, but it's time for me to do my journey. And it's going to be special because it's going to be it's my life, and it's how I'm going to take, and I get to decide if I want that job or if I don't. I get to decide if I get to do this story or if I don't. So yeah, I mean,
and you're in a network that I think it's defined women's roles in news media. I think that I mean, you've touched on Maria Elena Salinas. We grew up with her. Right. And so, but you're that generation now that comes after that, right? So, in my humble opinion, I think you are. I mean, from just your attitude, from what you're working towards, I see your media, I see what you're doing, I see the social impact you're trying to make. I also see the obstacles that you face. I see the negative comments that they leave without knowing the whole story behind it, without knowing this.
Right.
And we'll end with these two, as I always ask our guests, our speakers on this, is like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and where do you see yourself in 10 years? Because you're a person that we need to be more of in our community, in the sense that I don't know what I want to do yet, right? Until we found this project, I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I know is that I like to talk to people, and I've always been a social person, right? In this type of era now, it's like really hard to be a social person, just because the negativity of people being in their own bubbles, of not looking up anymore. You see what I'm saying? Like they're always on their phone. But you're a person that's defined yourself first. So you define yourself. You set goals. You manifested them. You now look for resources of how to do them. Yes, we're not super privileged, and in some ways we are. And yes, we're limited in resources, but we gotta find that dog grit of just, what am I gonna do? Because our parents did that, immigrating here. And then after you set the goals, you work towards them. You took action. They didn't just stay as dreams, right? They were dreams that turned into goals that turned into action, right? And now you're here. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
It's always it's a great question, but it's always very, I don't know, interesting because I think at the end of the day, I want to be happy, I want to be happy and healthy and at peace with everything that I do. Enjoying life, obviously, those are things that I think, again, the basis of like how I live my life, just the best that I can. In terms of like my career, I definitely want to get into the English market. I think that's a goal that I've had now for a while, and it's like, again, working towards it. It's like feeding into your feeding into that application for that next thing. Like, what are you doing? So that's something that I've been interested in more, and more than anything in English news. So that's something that maybe in 5 years we can do this again, and I'll be like, hey, I'm here and I manifested this and it's happening. Still working really close with the community. I feel like there's still a need and there's still a place for us to tell our stories and to share our experiences and to tell our people's stories without filters from other people, without stereotypes from other people. Our real stories, to showcase that we're like a community of love, we're a community of values, we're a community of hard work, we're a community of dedication, we're a community of so many beautiful things. And we can do more, we can give more, we can be better. And if we can provide those resources and those tools, we must educate, we must educate our community, we must educate our kids, we must realize how important education is for the betterment of our families and of our communities. So that's the space that I want to be in, for sure, sharing and giving back to my people, being an advocate for our rights, being an advocate for our happiness as well as a collective, and being at a job and at a place that I also enjoy. I think that to me is super important, because I've always lived by that, like been at places where I really do care for what I'm doing. I really do care for the information and the work that I do daily. That's 5 years, 10 years. Oh my God, I would love, again, to include all of that realm. Maybe start teaching somewhere. And be a voice really, and a representation of my community, of my people.
What projects are you working on right now?
I have my podcast. That's been something too that we've been really excited about, and it's been growing so much, and we're just super thankful for it. But again, it's been a lot of sacrifice, a lot of work.
You're doing them in beds, right? Like
we're doing them on the beds of hotels, like literally. That's how crazy it gets. So that's something that really want to focus in the next few months and the next year. Also, like I've been doing a little bit more about my YouTube channel. I was a little hesitant to it at first, but now I've been very much more open about like sharing more and being more of like a help to people, and like and being more of like someone to give them good quality, like just information or just advice from my own experiences. I feel like that's always been very resonating with the people that follow me on social and digital.
And we're gonna end with legacy. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy means being a good person, being a good role model, showcasing the goodness that is in all of us, in somehow, some way, through your work.
What do you want to
the impact that you leave with people. I want to leave behind and just want to make sure that people take that from me, that I'm just like this Mexican American girl from the San Fernando Valley who's just living her life the best way she can, who wants to make people feel good, who wants to change the world, who wants to make the world better, for all of us here. I wish that's my legacy. You know, someone that was good, that was good-hearted, that was kind-hearted, that helped others through her work, through her values, through the way she led her life.